Today I'm going to be reviewing Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolor paints, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. This video is going to include my first impressions and my final thoughts of the paints after using them for about 2 months. The first thing that you can notice about this palette is that it looks hella aesthetic and it's actually in the name. I think Tambi is Japanese for aesthetic. At least that's what I found out on the internet. When I brought it home, my boyfriend got all excited because he literally thought it was candy. It's not, don't eat it, even though they look really tasty. Like the paints and the box, it looks like an expensive candy box. At first I was kind of worried of it coming in a cardboard box because I was thinking that it might get damaged by water, but it held up pretty well. After swatching these paints, you noticed how vibrant they are. They are much more vibrant than the normal Western watercolors that we're all used to. The difference between these and Western watercolors is the ingredients used in binding the paint. Western watercolors usually use only pigment and gum arabic, and the Japanese watercolors use a bunch of different stuff, like honey and like gelatin, if that's the right word for it in English. So in other words, it's not vegan, if you're curious. Another big difference is the pan size. I originally got this palette as a travel palette, but it's basically the same size as my regular palette, and my regular palette can hold up to 30 pans at once, and this one only has 12. So there's a huge size difference. The pans are about 3 times bigger than the regular full pan, but the Gansai Tambi pans are not really filled to the brim, so I'm not sure if there's really a big difference in how much paint is in the pan. I think it's about the same. Japanese watercolor brushes are a lot more bigger and can get easily damaged, so that's the reason why the pans are so big. After using these for about 2 months, I did a bunch of artwork with them, and they became kinda my primary palette. The main reason is the color vibrancy, and also it can get really opaque. You can reach different levels of opaqueness by using more or less water in the paint, and it can get basically as opaque as gouache, which is very impressive. The downside of using these paints as gouache is that they get really shiny if you use them as opaque watercolors, but they are basically like in the middle of Western watercolors and gouache, considering their opaqueness. At least that's where I would put them. They, of course, are really strong in vibrancy and aesthetics. The price, I think, is okay-ish. I bought it for 18 euros, so they are kind of in the middle of prices. They're not like really expensive, but they're also not cheap. So I think it would be like a great palette for beginners. I really liked the color selection. At first, I didn't really understand why there would be white watercolor, but I loved how you can get some pastel tones with it, so I'm not mad at it anymore. There's a lot of reds and greens and blues in this palette, so it's really great for painting landscapes and some nature scenes, which I did a lot with this palette, and they turned out pretty great, I think. After using this palette for 2 months, there wasn't any damage to the cardboard box. The watercolors held up pretty nicely. Of course, they got like dirty and things like that, but after you use something and you really love it, it's just destined to get dirty. and I hit the pan a few times. I think the main reason for this is that I'm not using soft Japanese watercolor brushes. I'm using rough synthetic brushes, and they're usually in much smaller sizes since I like to work on small pieces of paper. I just usually go into the middle of the pan, so I think that's the reason why I hit the pan. There's still a lot of paint left, it's just that I really like to use the paint out of the center. Overall, I really like this palette, but it also has some downsides. One of them is, as I said, that if you use the paint really opaquely, it gets shiny, which I'm kind of annoyed at. Not my thing, but if it's not a big deal for you, then I think you can use it as opaquely as you want. Another thing is that white, even if you use it really opaquely, when it dries, it doesn't look as opaque. You can still see the layers underneath, and it's not the best choice for white accents. The biggest downside of these paints is that you can't really use more than 3 colors to mix at once, because then it gets kinda muddy. And I didn't notice it for the longest time, but after doing this painting of this girl with water hair and fishes coming out of it, I definitely noticed it. And the main reason for this, I think it was my fault, because I didn't clean my palette which I was using, and I was just mixing paints on top of a dirty palette, and the paints underneath got it really muddy. In some instances I mixed about 4 colors, or I used already pre-mixed colors and mixed them with other colors. So yeah, it gets really muddy if you mix a lot of colors at once. But if you like to use it straight from the pan, it's really vibrant and beautiful, and I think maybe that's the reason why people usually like to buy these paint sets with a lot more pans, like 72 pans or 48 or whatever your lucky number is, you know. I didn't really had any shimmery paints in this set to test out, but I guess that they must be also amazing quality. I hope to test them out in the future if I get the chance. Yeah, and after I go through this set, I'm definitely going to buy a bigger one. If you want to get these watercolors, I would definitely recommend to get at least a 24 pan set, because 12 colors, if you can't really mix them too much, then I don't really see the point of getting. But if you're a beginner, then I think 12 pans can be enough for you, especially if you have more of a graphic style and you like to use just flat washes of color. Another great thing that at least I liked and which suited my style of working with watercolor was that if you let the layers dry completely, it's really hard to get it off. I know some people think that as a con, but for me it's more of a pro, because I just like to work in layers. If I want to lift watercolor up, you just have to act a little bit more quickly and not let it dry completely, and it lifts perfectly with a wet brush. So I didn't really had a problem with this aspect of this set. In conclusion, I really love it. I definitely recommend it if you're not a vegan, and yeah, it's great for beginners. Prices, as I said, more in the middle range. So yeah, I think this is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!